What's up everyone, welcome to HiFi Turntable where we talk about everything audio. In today's video we're going to be talking about my vinyl journey and where it is right now. If you've been following along and you've been subscribed to the channel, you know that I started to experiment with vinyl coming into the end of 2022, and in 2023 now I have taken it to the next level. My turntable is still the vintage JVC ALQ2 that my dad gave me, and it came with this Pickering cartridge. I don't know if he replaced the original cartridge or this is the cartridge that came with or what exactly the original configuration was, but this Pickering XSV3000 cartridge was mounted to it, and in my video that I talked about my appreciation for vinyl and what led me to start to go down the vinyl rabbit hole, a lot of the comments were saying, you need a new cartridge, you need a new cartridge, you need a new cartridge. And some from the standpoint of this cartridge is probably about 40 years old, if not older. And others saying, that cantilever looks shot. And indeed, when I went to Schroeder HiFi and had Tim Schroeder hook me up with the Ortofon Quintet Blue cartridge, and he set it up on the turntable, Tim definitely confirmed that the cantilever on this XSV3000 is indeed quite shot. So as you probably can guess, the subject of this video is primarily going to be the Ortofon Quintet Blue moving coil cartridge. So first and foremost, I want to talk about why I selected the Quintet Blue as my cartridge of choice and why I didn't go for anything else in the price category or decide to spend more or less than I did. And that spend is at $480 for the Quintet Blue. The obvious contender, I think, for this cartridge is the Hana EL moving coil cartridge. Now, the reason why I did not select the Hana is from reviews that I was reading and people's opinions. They were saying that the Hana is a more romantic, a more syrupy, a more laid back, a very strong vinyl flavor when it comes to the sound, whereas the Ortofon was a little bit more modern, a little bit more articulate, a little more analytical. So I thought that that sound style suited my preference better. I didn't want something that was overly romantic or overly embellished, at least on that very warm side that vinyl can bring out. At that around $500 mark is where I saw a lot of people start to gravitate as far as entry-level kind of audiophile cartridges. So there was something in that level that offered really high performance or really high value. Like I've said before, I don't see myself getting so into vinyl where I have a multi-$1,000 setup when it comes to the turntable cartridge, tone arm combination. So I thought this represented a very good price point in order to get a very high quality of sound. I selected a moving coil cartridge because I wanted to experience what a moving coil cartridge can do. My phono preamp, which is the Skit Manny 2. We're going to say it like that because we don't want to get deprioritized from YouTube because of bad words. And that can support the moving coil cartridge. And a lot of people that I trust were telling me that if your phono preamp can support a moving coil cartridge, those entry-level moving coil cartridges are the way to go. Now in the Ortofon family, there is actually one moving coil cartridge below the blue. We can go to the red, but I decided to go for the blue because once again, I felt like that closer to $500 range is where you really saw a lot of value with a lot of high quality sound. I also wanted to select a brand that my local hi-fi stores offered. And one, because I always want to support my local hi-fi stores. Remember to support your local hi-fi store. But two, there would be someone there that could help set this thing up for me because I really didn't know what I was doing. I still really don't know what I'm doing, but there was someone there that would be able to set this up for me and make sure it was done right so that there was nothing left up to chance where I would set it up wrong or feel like there's a possibility here that I'm not getting the full experience that I should be from this cartridge. And having Tim set this up for me was absolutely the right choice because even prior to selecting the blue, I was actually leaning more towards the orange. But what we discovered in talking with Ortofon was that the orange is much more sensitive to VTA adjustment than the blue. And since my turntable, the JVC ALQ2, does not have a VTA adjustment, we didn't want to take the chance that the VTA would be slightly off and it would actually end up sounding worse than the Blue. We also selected the SH4 head shell, which is not the recommended head shell for this cartridge by Ortofon. But the reason why we had to go with the SH4 is because, once again, my turntable would not work with the LH4000, which is the recommended one, because that head shell is heavier than the SH4. And my turntable will not be able to counteract the weight of that. So we got the SH4 head shell in bronze. This is to match the bronze series from Ortofon, but they only had bronze and red in stock. So I selected bronze, and I think the bronze with the blue actually looks pretty good. Tim and I definitely thought that it was a good color combo despite the mismatch. So now let's get into the sound. Now, I don't have a ton of experience with other cartridges. Like I said at the beginning of this video, my original cartridge was the Pickering XSV 3000, and this is really the only cartridge that I have any other meaningful experience with. So going to the Ortofon, there was a significant difference. And I feel like the Pickering is a very good cartridge on its own still. I think that it might be worth it in the future for me to replace the stylus on this thing. To be determined on that. But for now, it is a huge improvement, most definitely, and a very different sound, because I did feel like the Pickering was more on the analytical and maybe even a little bit dry at times kind of sound, whereas the Quintet Blue is very much so more airy, kind of ethereal, more what you probably associate when it comes to vinyl, that warmer sound, which surprised me again, because like at the beginning of this video I said the reason why I didn't go for the Hana was because people were saying that it was a much more warm and romantic sound than the Ortofon. So it surprised me that from playing with the Quintet Blue now for a while, that it still has that very much so romantic, syrupy, warm sound to it, and I don't think at all that it is overly analytical or bright in any sense. So let's talk about some music that I've been listening to on the Quintet Blue. And we'll start out with Dimmu Borgir's Ionian record. I honestly, in buying this and looking it up, I was shocked to find out that it came out in 2018. I feel like it came out yesterday, but it's been almost 5 years since this album came out, and it's still really good. I've always been a fan of Dimmu Borgir. Their older stuff, the more newer stuff that is kind of more symphonic in nature, but say what you will about Dimmu Borgir and, you know, their state of how truly black metal they are, they're still, you know, a great band. There's a lot of interesting notes on this album beyond your typical, you know, drums and guitars and vocals. There's a lot of very interesting percussion elements. There's some synthesizer elements, and I felt like on some of those more odd percussion elements, there are a little bit of a extra harmonic or more emphasized harmonic that ends up happening with some of these, and there's more meat on the bone when it comes to that. And you could say, well, you know, are you really trying to get that harmonic? Well, it's part of the music, and I think that it was an interesting listen, and it's something that I can't say that I've experienced with other forms before, where you don't get that kind of richness in those undertones. Stormkeep, Tales of Other Time. This is like an album for like Dungeons and Dragon nerds. You know, there's wizards, there's warlocks, there's dragons. It's a great album though. They're a pretty small band, but this is definitely a gem to find in kind of the black metal area. I didn't only listen to black metal with the Quintet, but I think that it is a very interesting genre, and it presents a lot of challenges when it comes to traditional hi-fi components, or, you know, I guess any hi-fi component or any kind of speaker setup. You know, I think black metal has a bad name for itself, and the way bands have behaved, of course, but then also just from like the recording perspective, that it started out as a genre of teenagers recording in their basement on tape recorders and, you know, equipment that they could just get their hands on. It wasn't like these guys were, you know, super rich and they had the best recording equipment. So that's always been the overarching kind of sound and theme of black metal, and you see that even today. But this is still a very highly polished album. I think that doesn't reflect this album at all. I think it's very highly polished. You can definitely hear a lot of the flaws. So I definitely did get a little bit of that analytical or more analytical at least, with the Quintet Blue over the Pickering in this instance, because I feel like the Pickering was much more forgiving in the sense to a record that wasn't ideally pressed or produced. So I definitely got a little bit more of that analytical nature in this album versus the Pickering, but still a warm, bassy, dark tone, and I think that fits a black metal album extremely well. But my favorite album to listen to on the Quintet Blue thus far has certainly been Rivers of Nile, Where the Owls Know My Name. This album, I love this album. I think this album is one of the best of the 2010s, maybe one of the best of the 2000 millennia, maybe one of the best of all time. I really don't think you can find a bad song on this album. It's so good. There's so much to offer. All the instrumentation is just so well refined, so well done, offers so much for so many different people. It is a technical death metal album, so, you know, if you only listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan and Diana Krall, maybe it's not the album for you, maybe it is, I don't know. I listen to some Stevie Ray Vaughan and Diana Krall too, but the instrumentation, the diversity of instrumentation, you have alto sax on here, which is just so strange, I guess, for your typical death metal album, but it's very well done. You have Teria 3, this kind of noise industrial sounding cut on here, and it sounds like, if you're familiar with the game Doom, you would honestly, the first time I heard this, I thought this was a track that was produced or written or somehow involved with Mick Gordon, who is the music director for a lot of the Doom games. And if you listen to the music that comes out of Doom and then compare it to this, I think that you would very much so feel like it had his hand somewhere in it. But no, it wasn't. And it's absolutely amazing. The violin comes in, and there's just this really dark, atmospheric, ethereal sense of just overwhelming dread and abandonment. But this isn't a review of Where the Owls Know My Name. This is a review of the Ortofon Quintet Blue, and we're listening to Where the Owls Know My Name. And I can tell you, all of the passion that I am talking about and comes out when I talk about this album is reflected in the sound that is coming out of the speakers when the Quintet Blue is playing. It is so well defined, so well reproduced on the Quintet Blue, so pleasurable to listen to. Absolutely my favorite album to listen to on the Quintet Blue. I don't even know if I could say that this album is my favorite record that I own, because I would have to put it up against Opeth's Blackwater Park, which I've probably talked to death about at this point, which I think is my favorite album of all time. But this one, despite being so different from Blackwater Park, is so good to listen to. And on the Quintet Blue, I felt that I was just enjoying it all over again. And that's a really magical feeling when you're listening to music and when you're so passionate about music, having that feeling of listening to the record again for the first time. And that is definitely that same kind of magic that I got listening with the Quintet Blue and being able to enjoy it to its fullest extent, a different extent, but its fullest extent regardless. And I definitely think just that feeling alone is a big selling point and maybe a testament to the quality of the Quintet Blue. That's going to do it for me for this video. Like I said, I'm still just getting into this whole turntable thing, and probably the next step for me is honestly going to be a new turntable. I don't know what that will be. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I don't know what I'm going to look for exactly, but that's probably in the cards this year for me as I've started to kind of go down this rabbit hole a little bit more. But again, the Quintet Blue, really fantastic sounding cartridge. I really think that it's well worth the money. I think that it was a worthy investment for me in order to get the most, or at least the most I can at this point, from my turntable setup. And of course, a huge thank you to Tim Schroeder, Schroeder HiFi, for helping me not only set this thing up, but also with the selection of the cartridge and making sure that this thing would work with my turntable, because honestly, I didn't ever think that I wouldn't be able to select a certain cartridge because my turntable didn't have the right weight, didn't have the right VTA, azimuth, whatever it may be. So huge thank you to Tim for making sure that this thing was set up properly, was done right, and I'm able to get this much enjoyment out of my turntable setup. If you like this video, I hope you give it that big thumbs up. I hope you subscribe. It really helps me out. Check the links below in the description for other ways to help support the channel. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Baby,